No, seriously, have you ever just been laying in bed at night and asked yourself that? Because a part of me refuses to believe we're just on a floating rock in the middle of space. When you start thinking like this, many more questions begin to surface in your head. Like, what is life? Where do we come from? What am I meant to be doing here? What is my purpose? Can you believe a Disney Pixar movie evokes these questions, these ideas? Disney's newest movie, Soul, is a kids movie made for adults? Hold on, I'm getting ahead of myself. This video is coming off a little more heavy than my usual videos. All right, let me get some jokes off. Okay. Berleezy, is that you?
What is that?
I first heard about this film from one of my favorite YouTubers, Berleezy.
Is that Frost?
His fan base likes to roast him and say that Berleezy looks awfully alike to Joe Gardner, the main character of Soul, which is pretty true. I mean, come on. Look, it's fine because he embraced the meme. He actually loved the movies. Seeing that Berleezy was able to enjoy this movie he became synonymous with piqued my interest in wanting to see the movie for myself. I believe this movie speaks to a certain kind of person, the very person I am. When I first watched this movie, I had no idea what I was getting into. And yet, when I finished it, it struck a chord with me, so much so that I felt obligated to make a video about it. This movie is perfect for people who are feeling lost in life. Before I even saw what anyone was saying about the movie on the interwebs, I knew the movie would be very misunderstood. One, because this is the type of movie where it forces you to come to your own conclusions, your own meanings. The film is very thought-provoking. See, in the very beginning of the movie, spoiler alert, Joe Gardner dies. Yeah, he dies right before he lands a gig that would supposedly change his life. When Joe dies, his soul is teleported to a conveyor belt that leads to the Great Beyond. The Great Beyond is this film's representation for the afterlife. So Joe's not ready to die quite yet, so he ends up jumping off the conveyor belt straight into a black void that ends up transporting him to the youth seminar, aka the Great Before. This is where unborn souls are created before they're sent to Earth. This was very interesting to me because it plays with the idea that I'm sure a lot of us have thought about, like, what are souls and where do they come from? Where was your soul before you were born? I mean, there's a lot of spiritual theories, that souls are from another realm of existence and they come to Earth to experience life. Very similar to what is portrayed in this movie. At the youth seminar, unborn souls are there to figure out their spark. A soul's spark is their passion, their meaning for existence, the reason for wanting to come to Earth and exist in this thing we call life. Look, I'm not gonna go over the whole movie frame by frame, but eventually, the main character Joe Gardner is paired with an unborn soul at the youth seminar named 22. 22 is a soul that's been at the youth seminar for a very, 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 very long time. And no mentor before Joe could help 22 find her spark. 22 had no desire to ever be born, no desire to come to Earth. All of 22's past mentors have all told her that, she was a failure, that she wasn't good enough, that she was one of the worst souls at the youth seminar. So, 22 felt like she didn't deserve to live because that's what everyone told her. Because when you're told something enough times, you really do start to believe it, especially when you're young. I just want to say this right now. You are not what people think of you, okay? Just remember that. Before Joe Gardner died, he lived his life being obsessed with jazz, okay? He loved jazz with every fiber in his being. And then when he seemingly gets the opportunity of his life, it's taken from him. So he's doing everything he can to get back to Earth so that he can finally live his dream, the thing he's been working his entire life for, an opportunity. It also goes deeper than that because Joe is also trying to prove to himself and his mother that he's not a failure. Joe's mom doesn't believe in his goals. She thinks that they are very unrealistic. And Joe wants to prove to her that he wasn't doing all of this for nothing, basically. He wants to prove her wrong, which is the driving force for a lot of our goals and motivations, am I right? A lot of us want to succeed just so we can prove people wrong, so that we can rub it in their faces. Because they say success is the best revenge. Long story short, like I said, I don't want to go over the entire movie, but at some point, 22 and Joe ends up going to Earth, but except, due to unfortunate circumstances, 22's soul was accidentally placed inside of Joe's old body, and Joe's soul was placed inside of a therapy cat that was with him in the hospital. Yeah, I know. This sounds really, really silly if you haven't seen the movie, but it really gives Joe a chance to look at his life from a third-person perspective. Once 22 started living Joe's life in his body, she was very afraid at first of the overstimulus of life, but she quickly learned to enjoy conversation. She enjoyed eating, and she enjoyed walking. She enjoyed just being around the trees. She enjoyed music, when she was at the youth seminar, she didn't really enjoy anything. There's a scene where 22 in Joe's body, she goes to the barbershop to talk to Joe's old friend named Dez. Joe, as the cat, says to 22 that Joe and Dez only talked about jazz whenever they saw each other. But when 22 was in Joe's body, Dez and 22 actually had some very interesting conversation, and we actually learned more about Dez. Before they walked in the barbershop, Joe said to 22 that Dez was born to be a barber because he was so good at it. Turns out, Dez actually wanted to be a veterinarian when he was growing up, but his daughter got sick. He says that barber school is a lot cheaper than veterinarian school, and that's how he just ended up as a barber. To me, I took this as the show is kind of foreshadowing that you never know where life is going to take you, even if you have a set route for yourself in your mind. Oh yeah, also the movie's antagonist, Terry, comes down to Earth from the youth seminar to try to bring Joe's soul back to the great beyond. Okay, that's also a thing that's happening. So while all of this is happening, Joe and 22 are on Earth trying to figure out things and prepare for Joe's big gig. Meanwhile, there's a woman? Actually, I'm pretty sure Terry is a woman. Listen, I'm not gonna assume it's gender, but Terry is on Earth on the lookout for Joe. After leaving the barbershop, 22 was still on Earth and learning to enjoy the little things in life, like walking, riding the subway, and looking at the trees. Things that Joe took for granted in his normal life. Things that he just considers regular old living, quote unquote. Ask yourself this: when is the last time you took a second to just live in the moment? Things that happen every day all around us that we have come to get used to. I'm sure the vast majority of us take these things for granted, including myself. Listen, I know it's hard to live in the moment with so many things on our minds at any given time. School, work, stress, family, bills, friends, relationships, social media, our goals. Life in general can be very overwhelming, but most of our lives are filled with the little things that were meant to be enjoyed, not just your goals or any other thing that I named before. 22 learns to enjoy living while in Joe's body. There's a scene in the film where Joe needs to visit his mother because his suit ripped right before the big show, and the only problem is Joe doesn't want to see his mother. Especially with 22 controlling his body. Like I said earlier, Joe's mother doesn't believe in his dreams and goals. She thinks they're very unrealistic, alright? She would rather him have a good, stable job with insurance, When Joe visits his mom to get his suit fixed, they have a pretty intense conversation. And also, this scene has the smoothest transition I've ever seen in my life. It's the scene where Joe, as the cat, transitions to telling 22 exactly what to say to his mom. That shit's fire. They have a pretty real conversation, and I think this scene hits home for me because Joe's mom kind of reminds me of my own mom. Joe ends up telling his mother that the reason he absolutely needs to make it to the show is because he doesn't want to feel like if he died today that his life was meaningless. His mother gives in. There's a tear-jerking scene, and they hug. His mother agrees to tailor his suit. She actually ends up letting Joe use his old father's jazz suit. Let's skip forward a little. Right when Joe and 22 are about to make it to Joe's big, life-changing jazz gig, Terry, the antagonist, finds them and brings them back to the youth seminar. When Joe, Terry, and 22 return to the youth seminar, they noticed 22 actually found her spark while on Earth, and she obtained her Earth badge. The Earth badge is what allows an unborn soul able to come to Earth for the first time. Because of this, Joe is told that he's allowed to escort 22 to the Earth portal before he's sent to the great beyond. 22 is very confused because she has no idea how she unlocked her Earth pass. She has no idea what her spark is. She has no idea because, she had to have found it earlier in order for her badge to change while on Earth. Joe has a really selfish moment, and he makes 22 feel really guilty for finding her spark while in his body on Earth. He tells her things like, "You only found your spark because you were in my body," and making it seem like she still has no purpose, making her feel like she doesn't deserve to live, just like everyone else did. Because all of 22's past mentors made it seem like in order to live, you have to have some massive goal or some intense passion for something to even be worthy of living. 22 ends up giving her Earth pass to Joe so that he could go back to Earth and live again in his own body, basically sacrificing her own newfound desire of wanting to experience life, wanting to live. So, Joe takes the badge and returns to Earth, but this time in his own body. Joe ends up playing the jazz gig of his life, has an amazing performance. The crowd loved it, and it was over. Now what? This gig that he's been working his entire life for, his dream, he finally lived it. He accomplished his goal, play the gig of his life with his jazz idol, Dorothea Williams. He finally did it, but after it was over, all he could ask is, now what? The fact of the matter is, life goes on. Even after you accomplish your magnum opus goal, life will still continue because your passions are not your purpose. Joe still had more to do, more to experience. When Joe asked the question, now what, to his idol, Dorothea Williams, she responded, "We'd do the whole thing all over again tomorrow." This show that Joe thought would be the biggest thing in his entire life will just be repeated every day, and soon it'll be normalized. Just normal living. Before his idol Dorothea gets in her car, she tells Joe a story about an old fish and a young fish. A metaphor. The story goes something like a young fish swims up to an old fish and says, "Hey, I want the ocean." The old fish says, "The ocean, you're swimming in it." Then the young fish replies and says, "This ain't the ocean, this is water." See, what I took from this metaphor is that as people, we don't realize we already have everything that we're seeking, everything that we're looking for, only up until we get it, if that makes sense. Joe was only looking to do that gig so that he wouldn't feel like a failure, to prove to himself that he was a real jazz musician and not just a middle school jazz teacher. But he had yet to realize that he was already a fantastic musician, with or without the gig. His mother loved him with or without the gig. So Joe goes home after the show feeling a little melancholy because he realized he just took away this poor little girl's chance at living, and his dream wasn't everything it thought it would be. So Joe ends up playing on his piano in his home, and he gets into this thing the movie establishes is called the zone. Basically, the zone in this movie is a place in between physical and the spiritual world that people get into when they're in a trance-like state, indulging in their passions. So Joe does this to revisit the spiritual world in order to get back to the youth seminar, yada yada yada. I swear this all makes sense if you actually watch the movie. Go watch it if you haven't. There's a guy named Moonwind. I've had no reason to mention him, but he conjures a hippie spirit boat. It's great. But 22 ends up becoming a lost soul because of everyone telling her she's not good enough, and even Joe, this person she felt like she finally bonded with, seemingly turned his back on her. And on top of that, making her feel like shit for wanting to live, basically. Yeah. Joe gives her back her Earth Pass because meeting 22 ultimately helped him realize that there's a lot more to life than your goals, and to enjoy the little things in life, you know? I believe 22's spark was just living. Not everyone needs a passion or a goal to enjoy life. No matter what everyone wants you to believe. So yeah, Joe would have to die again since he's given back his Earth Pass. But, you know, Joe ends up inspiring the beings in charge of the souls in the great beyond, and they give Joe a second chance at life. Now, some people have said that this ruins the movie, that Joe should have died because he fulfilled his life goal and was seemingly ready to die and let 22 live after all. But I feel like Joe coming back is a metaphor for Joe actually being able to truly live his life for the very first time, and not just focusing on jazz. After all, Joe's spark wasn't jazz. Remember, your spark is not your passion. I believe that Joe's purpose is to inspire others, just like he did with 22. This soul that was seemingly unredeemable. To bring it back to the fish in the ocean metaphor, turns out Joe was inspiring people the entire time as a middle school band teacher, ironically. Guys, if you're feeling lost in life, please, watch this movie and try to view it with an open mind. And if you do, let me know your interpretation. Subscribe if you enjoyed, and be sure to enjoy life, and thanks for watching. All right, bye.
Movie's over. Go home.